Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Brian Carlson, and today we'll be talking about citations and references. So, specifically, we'll be talking about how to avoid plagiarism, the difference between in-text citations and your references. Because one of the fastest ways to get yourself in hot water is via plagiarism, where you take someone else's, where you take someone else's work and you represent it as your own. You can also get busted for plagiarism of self plagiarism, where you take your writing from one class and use it for the purposes of another class as well. So, anyway, we'll talk all about how to get around that. So, how to make sure that you're giving credit where credit is due. And the way that you do that is through citations and references. So the first thing, plagiarism, how to avoid it. Here's a definition. When you present someone else's ideas, words, or images as your own. So you aren't giving credit where credit is due. And this violates APU's ethical standards, that's in your code of conduct. And as I mentioned, this is one of the fastest ways to get in trouble at APU. So let's not plagiarize, right? Let's use appropriate citations instead. So the way that you cite or give credit to a source in your writing is either through paraphrasing or quotations. In high school, they taught you quote, right? To use these direct quotations of taking the author's words and plugging them into your paper and just making it really clear to the reader that these aren't your words. They were lifted from Allport in his 1954 book, The Nature of Prejudice, on page 1. In psychology, in higher education, college, university, get away from direct quotations. My advice is never use another direct quotation. Instead, paraphrase. Paraphrasing is what I want you to do instead, and what all of your psych faculty members would push you towards. Paraphrasing means you read through someone else's work, right? You read through Allport's The Nature of Prejudice book, and then you get the points that he's making on page 1, and then you write them down in your own words. And then after you finish that sentence, then you give credit Allport in the book you published in 1954. Paraphrasing is better for a whole bunch of reasons. First, paraphrasing allows you to keep your own voice, so the paper flows a lot more easily. Um, and if you're constantly using direct quotations, just pulling other people's voices in, it gets really kind of clunky. Not only do you have these big blocks of other people's words in your paper, but it's hard to really weave it all together in a natural way. So anyway, paraphrase from here on forward. And there's a couple ways of when you've paraphrased, right? You've written someone else's, you've read someone else's work, you've written their idea in your own words. What you can do is have an in-text citation. So in that text that you just wrote, you're going to cite or give credit to Allport. What you could do is in the text say, according to Allport, and then right after you say Allport, put in parentheses the year that the work was published in, 1954. According to Allport, people are prejudiced. Or what you can just do is lead with the claim, people are prejudiced, and then have after that claim, that idea that wasn't your own, you cite Allport 1954. Personally, and other psychologists in our department would recommend as well, sticking all those citations at the end, using people are prejudiced, and then including all the citations at the end of your sentence. And the reason why is because when you pull Allport out and give him special attention of like, according to Allport, what you're doing is you're directing the reader's focus towards Allport. Like, who is this person, right? Who is this guy? And there's times where that's appropriate, like according to Freud, and you might be talking all about Freud, and you want to draw the reader's attention to that. But most of the time, you might be bouncing back and forth, and you don't want your paper to say, according to Allport, according to Freud, according to DeVideo, according to Collison, according to Acklin. Like, you don't want to be dropping all these people, all these researchers' names in there, when at the end of the day, the researchers aren't important. The research is, right? The people, right? Allport is important, but the fact that he studied and made this claim that people are prejudiced, that's what you want your reader focused on, not his name. So anyway, I would recommend always paraphrase, and the vast majority of the time, put the researcher's name at the end of the sentence that you paraphrased. But what if you're citing someone else's work and it was either done by one person, or maybe it was done by Collison and Eck, right? Two authors. The number of authors matters in these in-text citations. So if it is just one author, it's going to be the author's last name, comma, the year that it was published. Allport, 1954. If it's two authors, now it's going to be Jones and William. Notice that you have the ampersand in between Jones and Williams, followed by the year that this work was published in. If it's three or more authors, jump right into the first author's last name, Seligman et al. This is a different change from the 6th edition of the APA publication manual. Before it was, if it was so many, you list them all the first time, and then if they did it again, then you did et al. APA 7th edition is keeping it simple. If there are 3 or more authors, you do the first author's last name, and then you jump right into et al., which means everybody else, period, comma, the year that their work was published. And some of the claims that you might be making might be really general, and they might be supported by multiple articles that you're reading. And that's fine. If you want to make a broad claim that's supported by a lot of different studies, you can have multiple citations within the same kind of parentheses of that sentence. An example of this would be something like, research on assortative mating suggests partners that are similar to one another tend to form and maintain relationships. This was found in Burscheid's research and Burns' research and Crow and Fesselstein's research. In fact, Burscheid is showing that like the more similar your values are to someone else, the more you like them. Byrne and Nelson are showing the more similar your personality is to someone else, the more you like them. Crow and Fesselstein is talking about the more similar your shoe size is and your height is to someone else, the more you like this person, are more likely to form a relationship with that person. Of like short people partnering with other short people and tall people partnering with other tall people. So notice that all 3 of these papers are very different. One's about values, one's about personality, one's about physical traits, physical attributes, but they're all making this same kind of general idea that like you're most likely to partner with someone who's similar to you. So it's fine to make that single claim, you're likely to partner with someone who's similar to you, and have multiple in-text citations all within the same parentheses. And if you're wondering, well, which one goes first? They go in alphabetical order. So Burscheid, BE, goes before Byrne, and Crow goes after Byrne, goes after Burscheid. So alphabetical order. And if you have questions about this, your APA publication manual is going to have a lot more example papers and a lot more instruction. So within the body of your paper, you're going to have a lot of in-text citations. At the very end of your paper, right, on the next page, you're going to have a reference section where you're going to give extra information about all those papers and books and tweets and articles, all that stuff that you read and included in your paper. That's called the references. Never call it works cited. Never call it bibliography. This is some MLA jargon. Like scratch that, forget about it. All your psychology class are going to use APA style, American Psychological Association. So this triggers your instructor, it pisses them off. Don't do it. So after you finish your text, right, on the next page, you're going to have bold, centered in the top, references, and then every in-text citation that was included in your paper is going to go in the reference section. So that way, when someone else is reading and being like, huh, who is this, like Burscheid and Walster? What they can do is now jump over to your references section, like, oh, okay, they're talking about that paper about similar values that was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. Now I can go and find that paper and read it for myself. So that's why your references are really, really important. And your references tend to have a really kind of formulaic pattern. They all start with the author's last name. And there's different ways to format references for journal articles, versus websites versus newspapers versus tweets versus books. I think there it was like I think there's easily like more than 100 different types of references that you can include, and those are all all listed in your APA publication manual, 7th edition. So I'm not going to cover them all here. This would be the world's longest video. Instead, what I'm going to talk about briefly is the type of articles that you'll cite over and over and over again. And those are journal articles. And they have a very similar kind of layout. Author's last name, comma, their first initial. So this might be like Robert A. Burke or something like that. So the first initial, their first name, and then their middle initial, if they list one, the year that that paper was published, right, in parentheses, close parentheses, period, and then the title of that article. Notice here that only the first letter of the title is being capitalized. So top 20 strategies to increase the online response rate of student rating scales. Right? Period. That's the title. Then in italics, you're going to say what journal this was published in. So this was published in International Journal of Technology and Teaching and Learning. And then after that, what you're going to include is the issue number. So issue number is also going to be italicized, and then in parentheses next to it, not italicized, is the volume. Or sorry, volume and issue. Yeah, sorry for flipping those. So the bigger journals will publish more than one issue every year. So what this is telling you is like this journal has probably been around for like 8 years. They've had like 8 different issues, and they might have like a summer volume, a spring volume, a fall volume. This is saying like this is the second one. So issue, volume, comma, and then the page numbers of that article followed by a period. It's tempting to copy and paste the reference from the APA library. They try and help you out by formatting it for you. There are undoubtedly errors, and a lot of times the errors pop up when it comes to italicizing the title and the volume issue number, right? So the issue number should be italicized, volume not. And when you're writing the references section, what I don't want you to do is hit the tab button. You see how this is a hanging indent where Avery, Burke, and Burke hang over, but there's like an indent for every line inside of that. When you're typing it out, don't hit the tab button on your computer. What I want you to do is type all this out and then highlight all of it, and then click on the special indentation options in your computer and click on a hanging indent. And that way it'll format it for you perfectly. That way, if you go back and you change anything, it'll automatically do it and not mess up your formatting for your entire paper. So here's some more information about journal articles, books, chapters in edited book. Here are just 3 that you might use a lot. Something to keep in mind though is there are hundreds of different types of sources that you can cite, and your APA publication manual is full of those. The only one that I would memorize, because you'll use it over and over and over again, is journal articles. So you have your authors, the year, the title of the article, the name of the journal that is published in, the volume that's in italics, followed by the issue, the page numbers, and some articles will have the DOI number, digital object identifier, and if you have that, then include that as well at the end. So that's it for citations and references. Good luck writing your papers.